The rain had just stopped. The long, waterlogged street reflected the flickering neon lights blotchy like smeared paint across the gloomy sky. A biting chill rose from the pavement, seeping into every pore of the flesh. Amid that heavy atmosphere, hurried footsteps echoed urgent, frantic, and desperate. Natalia Smith was running. She didn't know how long she had been running. All she knew was that behind her, the growling voices of burly men still roared, chasing after her with every breath she took. This woman won't escape no matter where she hides. Debts must be paid, life included. Natalia's breath was broken, her chest on the verge of exploding. Her beautiful face was smeared with rain and tears, her wet hair plastered against her nape tangled with dirt. But her eyes still shone with a resilience, as if she would never collapse, even if the darkness swallowed her whole. Numbers of debts, piles of loan papers flashed in her mind. It all started with her mother, a miserable woman who had fallen into gambling, leaving a mountain of debt piled upon her daughter's shoulders. Natalia did not hate her mother. She only felt her heart bleeding more and more each day. When her legs were about to give out, Natalia saw a faint yellow light from a small roadside diner. The dark wooden door rattled slightly in the wind, its glass window blurred with rain. Without thinking, she dashed in like a drowning person clinging to a fragile piece of driftwood. The doorbell chimed softly. Inside the diner was empty. Only one man sat at a wooden table near the window, tall, broad-shouldered, his simple white shirt so immaculately clean that it stood out in the shabby setting. In front of him was a steaming bowl of soup. The man lifted his head. Deep gray-blue eyes like the abyss of a dark sea locked onto Natalia's. In that moment, every sound seemed to stop. Natalia froze, her heart pounding, uncertain if it was from fear or from his gaze. She rushed forward, her cold, trembling hand clutching onto the stranger's arm. "Please, please, help me." Her voice shook hoarse like the final cry for salvation from the depths of her soul. The diner's door burst open again. The debt collectors stormed in their breath, reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. A tall brute snarled, "Don't think you can escape, Natalia. Your mother owed and you'll pay." Natalia staggered back, her whole body trembling. But the man beside her remained seated, his eyes slowly lifting toward the intruders. He didn't say a word, only his gaze. But that look thickened the air. A chilling, commanding pressure so suffocating that the entire room seemed to freeze. The leader about to step forward suddenly stopped. Sweat broke out on his forehead. The group exchanged nervous glances, and as if strangled by some invisible force, they began to back away, trembling, then bolted out, not daring to look back. Natalia was stunned. She had never witnessed such terrifying authority. No weapons, no shouting. Merely his presence had driven away a gang of strong men in fear. He set down his spoon. His voice was deep, warm, yet edged with cold steel. "Are you all right?" A simple question, but to Natalia, it felt like a stream of fresh water in the desert. Natalia hesitated. "Who are you? Why were they so afraid of you?" The man's lips curved slightly, a smile, just enough to make her heart flutter, yet at the same time send a chill down her spine. "All you need to know is, tonight you escaped." Then he stood. When he rose, Natalia saw clearly his tall, strong, commanding figure. His eyes looked straight into hers, making it impossible to turn away. "Come with me. It's no longer safe for you here." Natalia froze. Instinct told her not to trust a stranger, but her heart and her desperation made her nod. She followed him out into the rain that still poured relentlessly. Two silhouettes, a man and a woman, walking side by side into the night, as if destined. His name was Anthony Morgan. And Natalia, could she know, that the moment she grasped his hand tonight was the very instant fate would rewrite her entire life. That night, Natalia only knew she had escaped the debt collectors. But Anthony was different. From the first moment he saw her, he recognized this trembling woman begging before him was the very same girl who had once saved his life when he was hunted down bleeding in a dark alley years ago. A circle of fate was closing. A bond thought lost had now returned, reunited in the midnight rain. The rain kept falling. The city still glowed with flashing billboards. Natalia followed behind Anthony, her heart overflowing with questions. Who was he? Why had the debt collectors been terrified by nothing but his gaze? And why, when he looked at her, did his eyes carry such tenderness, as if they had known each other for a long time? At the dark corner at the end of the street, a stranger still watched. His lips curled into a smirk, his finger tightening around the gun hidden in the night. Natalia walked behind Anthony, each step blending with the pattering sound of the rain. The city late at night was deserted. Only the streetlights remained, casting their glow, stretching the shadows of the two of them across the water-stained pavement. She did not dare ask more questions, only silently watched the tall, imposing figure ahead of her. His shoulders were straight, every step steady, unnervingly calm. That calmness, in the context of her near escape from death, only made Natalia feel as though she had stumbled into another world. Her heart was tangled with countless thoughts. Who was this man? Why could a single gaze make the debt collectors tremble and flee? And why, when she looked deep into those gray-blue eyes, did she glimpse a sorrow, a vague longing, as if they had known each other from another lifetime? Anthony opened the door of a sleek black car parked along the street. The faint scent of new leather lingered. The plush seats made Natalia feel as though she had just stepped into another world. He slipped into the driver's seat, his movements decisive but unhurried. The car sped forward, slicing through the curtain of rain. Inside, silence prevailed. Natalia sat curled up, her hands clutching the hem of her dress. I thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. Anthony glanced at her, the corner of his lips curving slightly. He didn't reply immediately, only focused on driving. Yet in his eyes, an undercurrent rose. For so many years he had searched. That face, those eyes, that trembling plea for help, that was the very image he thought had vanished from his life. Anthony remembered. Years ago, when he was still a nameless man, he had been hunted by enemies. His body covered in wounds, his shirt soaked with blood, he collapsed in a cold, dark alley. As the light faded, he saw a young girl, her face gentle, her eyes glowing with compassion. She had knelt down without hesitation, wiping the blood from him, bandaging his wounds, whispering words of comfort. That night, she had saved his life. And tonight, when Natalia stepped into that diner, he recognized her immediately. Though time had changed much, he knew without doubt it was the same girl. But Natalia did not remember. Perhaps back then she thought saving a man was nothing extraordinary. But for Anthony, it was destiny. The car stopped before a luxurious restaurant. Natalia was taken aback. She didn't understand why she was brought here. "You need to eat. You look like you're about to collapse." His hoarse voice resonated. Somehow, without her noticing, he had begun calling her you, in the familiar tone so naturally that she did not protest. Inside, the golden lights glowed softly, jazz music drifting gently through the air. Natalia sat across from him, her eyes still shadowed with confusion. Anthony quietly observed. Every small movement she made, every frown, every drop of water clinging to her hair, tightened his chest. "Who are you?" At last. Natalia couldn't restrain herself. Anthony looked straight into her eyes. Those deep gray-blue eyes seemed to swallow her whole. He was silent for a long while, then softly said, "A man you once saved." Natalia froze. She stared blankly, unable to grasp his words. "I saved you." Anthony gave a slight nod, but then he smiled as though he did not wish to force her to remember. "It's all right. Even if you don't remember, I will never forget." That night when she returned to her small apartment, Natalia sat in silence for hours. In her mind echoed Anthony's deep voice, that phrase once saved by you leaving her heart in turmoil. A hazy memory drifted back. Once years ago, she had helped an injured man in a dark alley. But back then, she was young, acting only on instinct. Could it really have been him? She wasn't sure. Yet the way he looked at her, the sincerity and hidden sorrow in his gaze, made her heart tremble. Even so, fear still engulfed her. Anthony Morgan was clearly not an ordinary man. With just a look, he had driven away thugs. A man like that, was he truly her benefactor or the most dangerous man of all? While Natalia was lost in thought elsewhere in the city, a clandestine meeting was taking place. Powerful men sat around a long table. One spoke, "Anthony Morgan has appeared, and he is protecting a woman. That is his weakness." Another sneered with contempt. "How amusing. That cold man finally has a weakness. This is our chance." In the darkness, the plan for revenge began to unfold. The next day, as Natalia stepped out of her apartment, she saw Anthony leaning against the familiar car. His arms were folded, his eyes still cool, but when he saw her, the corner of his lips curved slightly. "Let's go. I'll take you to work." How do you know I live here?" Natalia frowned. Anthony shrugged. "Not hard to find out. And I don't want you to be in danger anymore." Those words left Natalia conflicted. She didn't know whether to be grateful or angry for being controlled. But his determined eyes, the worry hidden within them, made her unable to refuse. On the road, they talked more. Natalia spoke of her small job at a cafe, of the crushing debt her mother had left behind. Anthony listened in silence, occasionally murmuring an mm, but his gaze never strayed from her. Within Natalia stirred a strange feeling. This man made her feel both uneasy and protected. That night when Natalia returned home, she found a photo slipped under her door. In it, her mother Ruth sat before a gambling table surrounded by strange men. Beneath the picture, scrawled words read, "This debt has never disappeared." "How long can you run?" Natalia trembled, clutching the photo. Tears welled up. She knew the storm was far from over. Just then, the phone rang. It was Anthony. "Natalia, don't be afraid. I'll take care of it." His voice was firm, powerful, to the point she almost believed completely. Through her tear-blurred eyes, Natalia whispered softly, "Who are you really?" "Anthony Morgan." On the other end, Anthony closed his eyes, whispering silently to himself. He knew one day Natalia would learn everything, and when that time came, would she still love him, or hate him forever? Night fell once again. Above, the city lights blazed brightly, but within each heart lay its own darkness. Anthony looked toward the horizon where the rain poured down. He knew destiny had drawn him and Natalia back together. But destiny was a double-edged sword. It brought love, but also sowed tragedy. And the real game had only just begun. The morning after the unsettling phone call, Natalia woke with the uneasy feeling that she was no longer living her own life. The photograph of her mother Ruth, surrounded by card tables and shadowy figures, still burned in her mind. She had hidden the picture in a drawer, yet even in hiding, It seemed to breathe whispering threats through the cracks of wood. Her small apartment felt suffocating, the walls closing in, as though they too knew secrets she could not escape. She pressed her palms to her face and whispered into the silence, "What am I doing?" And yet underneath the fear, another presence lingered in her heart. Anthony Morgan. His voice from the night before, low, steady, unyielding, still echoed inside her. "Don't be afraid. I'll take care of it." Natalia shook her head, frustrated by her own weakness. She had survived for years without anyone to lean on. She had carried her mother's debts, her loneliness, her heartbreaks, without asking for help. But one look into Anthony's storm-colored eyes, and her resolve crumbled. A sharp knock startled her. She froze, her heart pounding. For a terrifying moment, she imagined the debt collectors had returned. She tiptoed to the peephole. It was him. Anthony Morgan stood tall in the dim hallway, a shadow cut against the flickering light. He wasn't smiling. His expression was unreadable, as though carved from marble. Natalia hesitated before opening the door. "Good morning," he said simply, his voice carrying a calm authority. Her lips parted, but no words came. He didn't wait for permission, stepping inside, as though her apartment was already familiar to him. Natalia's instinct should have screamed in protest, but oddly, it didn't. He glanced around briefly, then turned his gaze back to her. "You didn't sleep." It wasn't a question. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, but his eyes left her no escape. "No," she admitted softly. He nodded once, as if he had expected that answer. Then he extended his hand. "Come with me." The black car waited again, sleek and silent, like a predator at rest. Natalia slid into the passenger seat, her pulse quickening. Anthony drove with the same effortless control he seemed to exert over everything: the wheel, the road, the very air around him. Natalia kept her eyes fixed on the blur of the city, afraid that if she looked at him too long, she would drown in questions she wasn't ready to ask. But silence pressed too heavily between them. Finally, she found her voice. "Why are you doing this? Why do you keep showing up?" His lips curved, but the smile never reached his eyes. "Because whether you like it or not, you're part of this now." Natalia turned to him sharply. "Part of what?" He didn't answer immediately. His fingers tightened slightly on the steering wheel. She caught the faintest glimpse of tension beneath his calm facade. "The world I live in," he said at last, "is not the world you know. And once they've seen your face, they won't forget it." A chill ran through her veins. "They? Who are they? Enemies," he replied. "Mine. And now, yours." He drove her to a part of the city she had never visited before. Narrow streets lined with discreet buildings, guarded gates, windows too dark to see through. They stopped before a towering structure of glass and steel, elegant yet imposing. Inside, the air was cool, perfumed, faintly with leather and power. Natalia realized this wasn't just a building. It was a fortress. Men in tailored suits bowed their heads as Anthony passed. Their eyes followed Natalia, some curious, some wary. She felt naked beneath their gazes, out of place in her simple blouse and jeans. Anthony led her into a private elevator. When the doors closed, silence engulfed them again. Natalia gripped the railing, her knuckles white. Finally, she whispered, "You still haven't told me who you really are." Anthony's eyes met hers, unwavering. "You'll find out soon enough. But for now, trust me. That's all I ask." His office was vast, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Dark wood and steel blended into an atmosphere of restrained luxury. Natalia felt as though she had stepped into the heart of another universe, one where power pulsed invisibly through every corner. Anthony poured 2 glasses of wine, though it was hardly noon. He handed one to her, his fingers brushing hers for the briefest second. The touch burned like fire, though his expression remained unreadable. "You think I'm dangerous," he said, watching her closely. Natalia swallowed hard. "Aren't you?" For a long moment he was silent. Then he leaned back, swirling the wine in his glass. "Dangerous, yes, but never to you." Her chest tightened. His words felt like a promise or a curse. Later, when the sunlight slanted golden across the office floor, Anthony finally spoke of the past. "You don't remember," he began, voice low, "but years ago, you saved my life." Natalia looked up sharply. "I was nobody." Then, he continued, "wounded, hunted half dead in an alley. You came. You didn't ask who I was or why I was bleeding. You just helped, bandaged me, gave me water, and left before I could even ask your name." Natalia blinked. The memory stirred faintly a night long ago, when she had been walking home and found a man collapsed in the dark. She had been terrified, yet her instincts pushed her to help. Afterward, she told herself to forget it. Her lips trembled. "That was you, yes." His gaze softened for the first time, shadows giving way to something achingly human. "From that night, I knew I owed you a debt I could never repay. Until now." Natalia's eyes filled with tears. She didn't understand. Gratitude, fear, or something deeper, something far more dangerous. Days passed, and Natalia found herself drawn again and again into Anthony's orbit. He appeared at her door, at her work, in her thoughts. Each time she told herself to resist, yet each time she surrendered a little more. There was a duality in him she could not reconcile: the ruthless power that made men tremble, and the quiet tenderness that surfaced only when he looked at her. Sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. His expression then was raw, unguarded, filled with an intensity that made her shiver. And sometimes, when their hands brushed accidentally, her body betrayed her, with a rush of heat, a longing she was too afraid to name. One evening, as they left the building together, a man stepped from the shadows. His face was obscured, his voice hoarse. "She doesn't belong to you, Morgan," he sneered. "And when she pays her mother's debt, you'll lose her." Natalia froze, her breath catching. But Anthony's reaction was swift. A flick of his eyes, a gesture almost imperceptible. Within seconds, the man was dragged away by unseen guards, his shouts swallowed by the night. Anthony turned to her, expression unreadable. "This is what I meant. You're part of it now." Her voice shook. "I never asked to be." "No," he admitted. "But fate rarely asks permission." That night, Natalia lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mind replayed every moment: the rain-soaked alley, the photograph of her mother, Anthony's confession, the stranger's threat. She was trapped between fear and desire, between the urge to run and the need to stay. And beneath it all, pulsed a truth she dared not speak: she was falling for him. Far across the city, Anthony stood on a balcony, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the wind tugging at his shirt. He looked out over the glittering skyline, but his thoughts were only of her. He had power, wealth, an empire built on shadows. But for the first time, he also had something to lose. And he knew the war to keep her safe had only just begun. The hours after the confrontation haunted Natalia like a fever dream. Sleep refused to come, and when it did, it was broken by flashes of faceless men, whispers of debt, and eyes that gleamed with menace. Each time she woke, she expected to see shadows crawling across her walls. By morning, she sat curled in the corner of her couch, wrapped in a thin blanket. Her skin chilled, though the sun was already rising. Her reflection in the glass window startled her pale face, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, hair tumbling in untamed waves. She hardly recognized herself. Her phone buzzed. A message. "I'll be outside. A.M." Natalia pressed her lips together. The last thing she wanted was to appear fragile before Anthony. Yet a part of her ached at the thought of his presence, the strange safety she felt when he was near, even as danger clung to him like a second skin. When she stepped outside, the black car was already waiting. Anthony leaned against it, tall and commanding, a dark suit molding perfectly to his frame. His gaze softened imperceptibly when it fell on her, though the rest of him remained composed, as if he belonged to another world, a world of rules, discipline, and secrets. "You didn't sleep," he murmured. Natalia bristled, not from anger, but from how easily he could read her. "You seem to know everything," she said. Her voice edged with weary irony. He studied her face for a long moment, then opened the door for her. "Not everything, but enough." As she slid into the car, Natalia wondered if that was a promise or a warning. They drove without speaking for a while. Outside the city, awoke street vendors shouting taxis, honking pedestrians hurrying under umbrellas. Yet inside the car was silence, dense and heavy. Natalia finally broke it. "You can't keep doing this, appearing at my door, pulling me into your world as if I belong there. I don't. I never asked to." His jaw tightened. "And if I stopped, if I let you face them alone, what would happen to you?" She faltered. Because he was right. Alone she was vulnerable. Alone she had no defense against the men who stalked her every step, waiting for weakness. Anthony's voice softened. "You may not have asked for this, but fate has a way of binding people together, whether they want it or not." Her breath caught. The way he said it, low, almost reverent, made her heart tremble, though her mind screamed for distance. They arrived at a gallery in the heart of the city. Natalia frowned, confused. "A gallery?" she asked. Anthony's lips curved faintly. "Not everything in my world is blood and steel." Inside, the space was drenched in soft light. Large canvases lined the walls, each painted with bold strokes, colors colliding and merging in chaotic beauty. Natalia found herself slowing her eyes, lingering on each piece, forgetting for a moment the shadows that trailed her. Anthony stood slightly behind, watching her quietly. "You like them?" he asked. She nodded. "They're alive. Like someone painted not what they saw, but what they felt." He tilted his head, studying her more than the paintings. "You see more than most." Natalia flushed under his gaze, an odd warmth blooming inside her chest. Later they sat in the gallery cafe, the air filled with the faint scent of roasted coffee and varnish. Natalia wrapped her hands around a warm cup, needing something to ground her. "Anthony," she began softly, hesitating before using his name in full. "Why me? Why risk so much for someone like me?" His eyes gray as storm clouds locked onto hers. For a long time he said nothing. Then slowly, "Because once when I had nothing, you gave me something. A chance. A reason to live." Her throat tightened. She remembered faintly a night long ago, a man bleeding in the dark. She had bandaged his wounds, whispered that he would be all right, then fled before questions could follow. She had convinced herself it was just an act of humanity, but to him it had been salvation. "You've built an empire," she said quietly. "You don't need me." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "Empires mean nothing without someone to fight for." Her heart stuttered. She wanted to look away, but his gaze pinned her, unraveling the defenses she had clung to. That night, back at her apartment, Natalia sat in silence, replaying his words over and over. Empires mean nothing without someone to fight for. The confession should have terrified her. It should have sent her running. Instead, it ignited a fragile hope, a flicker of warmth that made the shadows feel less suffocating. Yet beneath the warmth, fear lingered. What if she became his weakness? What if loving him meant painting a target on her back forever? She pressed her hands against her chest, torn between the instinct to flee and the impossible pull that kept drawing her back to him. The next evening, Natalia received another message. A photograph again slipped under her door. This time, it was clearer her mother sitting at a card table, eyes hollow, her hands trembling over a stack of borrowed chips. Beneath the picture scrawled in thick ink, "Your debt is hers, and her debt is endless." Natalia's knees buckled. She sank to the floor, tears spilling unchecked. All her life she had carried her mother's mistakes, her addictions, her losses. And now it seemed the chains had tightened further, dragging not only her, but also the man who had stepped into her life like a storm. When Anthony saw the photograph, his expression hardened, his jaw set like iron. "They won't touch you," he said. Natalia shook her head desperately. "It isn't just me, Anthony. It's my mother. She'll never stop gambling, never stop owing. How can you fight something that's endless?" He cupped her face suddenly, his palms warm against her cold skin. His eyes burned with fierce determination. "Then I'll fight forever." Her breath caught. The intensity in his gaze frightened her, yet it also wrapped around her like armor. For the first time she believed, perhaps foolishly, that he truly could shield her from anything. That night, as rain drummed against the windows, Natalia found herself in Anthony's arms. It wasn't planned. It wasn't spoken. She had been trembling, her tears soaking into his shirt, and his hold had tightened instinctively, grounding her, steadying her. Their breaths mingled close enough that the air grew heavy between them. Natalia's heart pounded wildly, her fears dissolving under the quiet strength of his embrace. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to lean in, to rest against him, to imagine a world where she was not hunted, where love did not come, shackled with danger. Anthony held her as though she was the only real thing he had ever known. His lips brushed her hair, a silent vow pressed into the strands. Neither spoke. Words would have broken the fragile magic of that moment. But outside, the city did not sleep. In a smoke-filled room across town, men whispered plans, laid out photographs of Natalia, and traced circles around her face with sharpened knives. "She's his weakness," one muttered. "Then we know where to strike," another replied. Back in Anthony's arms, Natalia drifted into uneasy slumber, unaware of the storm gathering. And Anthony, awake long into the night, knew that love was no longer just a risk. It was a battlefield, and he had already chosen to fight. Natalia woke to the pale light of dawn filtering through sheer curtains. For a moment, disoriented, she thought she was still dreaming. Then she felt it, the weight of an arm draped protectively across her waist, the steady rise and fall of a chest against her back. Anthony! The realization made her breath catch. His warmth enveloped her, steady and grounding, yet it sent her heart racing with a dangerous awareness. She had not meant to fall asleep in his arms, not meant to blur the fragile boundary she had tried so desperately to keep. Carefully she shifted, turning her head slightly. His face lay in half shadow, the hard lines of his jaw softened by sleep. In repose, he looked almost human, almost vulnerable. Not the man whose name struck fear in whispered corners of the city. Natalia's fingers itched with the reckless desire to trace his features, to memorize him. But she curled them into fists instead. This closeness was a comfort she could not afford. Later, she found herself in his kitchen, expansive, all polished stone and steel, colder than any home she had ever known. She brewed coffee, the rich aroma filling the silence. Anthony appeared freshly showered, his shirt sleeves rolled, hair still damp. The domesticity of the scene unsettled her. It was too normal, too intimate, as if they were already living a life together that wasn't theirs to claim. He accepted a cup from her hand, his fingers brushing hers in a deliberate, lingering touch. Their eyes met. "You didn't run," he said quietly. Natalia blinked. "Run? You could have left while I slept. Disappeared. But you stayed." Her chest tightened. "Maybe I should have." His gaze deepened, pulling her into the storm she had come to know too well. "But you didn't." She looked away, sipping her coffee, trying to hide the trembling of her hands. The day unfolded unexpectedly gentle. Anthony took her to a secluded garden, hidden behind high walls in the heart of the city, a place he said few people knew existed. The air smelled of jasmine and ivy climbed ancient stone. Natalia wandered among the flowers, her fingers brushing petals heavy with dew. For the first time in days, she felt something close to peace. "Why bring me here?" she asked. Anthony stood a few paces away, his hands in his pockets, watching her. "Because sometimes I forget, this city still has beauty, and I wanted you to see it too." Her throat ached at the unexpected tenderness. "You surprise me," she murmured. His lips curved faintly. "You surprise me more." As they sat together on a stone bench, silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with unspoken words. Natalia turned to him. "Anthony, what do you really want from me?" His eyes darkened. For a moment, she thought he would speak, would finally peel back the last layer of mystery and reveal what lay beneath his calm exterior. But he only reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent. "What I want," he said softly, "might be the one thing that could destroy us both." Her breath caught. She wanted to press, to demand the truth. But his gaze silenced her, and the words remained unspoken, trembling in the air between them. That night, the illusion shattered. Natalia returned to her apartment, briefly determined to collect some belongings. Anthony had insisted on sending guards, but she refused, craving a shred of independence. The moment she stepped inside, she knew she wasn't alone. The air was wrong, heavy, expectant. She froze. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, a man with cruel eyes and a smirk that made her stomach twist. "Well, well, the famous Natalia Smith," he drawled. "No wonder Morgan's been distracted. You're prettier than I imagined." Fear spiked through her veins. She backed away, her mind racing. "What do you want?" she managed. "Simple," he sneered. "Leverage. Morgan's empire is iron, but even iron bends when the heart is weak. And you, darling, are his weakness." The man reached for her, but before his fingers could close around her arm, the door burst open. "Anthony!" He moved with lethal precision, faster than she thought possible. Within seconds, the intruder was pinned against the wall, Anthony's hand tight around his throat. Natalia pressed against the opposite wall, trembling. She had never seen him like this, all his carefully controlled calm stripped away, replaced by raw fury. His eyes blazed, his voice low and deadly. "If you ever touch her again," he hissed, "your body will never be found." The man choked, nodding frantically. Anthony shoved him away, signaling to unseen guards who had appeared as if from nowhere. They dragged the intruder out, leaving silence in their wake. Natalia's knees buckled. She slid down the wall, shaking. Anthony was beside her, instantly crouching, his hands firm on her shoulders. "Did he hurt you?" His voice was sharp with urgency. She shook her head, unable to speak. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over. Anthony gathered her into his arms without hesitation. She clung to him, sobbing into his chest, all her fear pouring out in broken gasps. "I can't do this," she whispered. "I can't live like this, being hunted, being used against you." His embrace tightened, fierce and unyielding. "You can, because you're stronger than you think, and I will never let them take you." Her heart ached at the certainty in his voice, the impossible promise he made, as if it were truth. Later, when her tears had quieted, Natalia lifted her gaze. His face was close, his eyes burning into hers, filled with both fury and tenderness. Something broke inside her, the last thread of resistance she had clung to. She leaned forward. Their lips met, tentative at first, then deepening, urgent, a collision of fear and longing, and everything left unsaid. The world outside ceased to exist. There was only his mouth on hers, his hands holding her as though she might vanish, the heat of him sinking into her skin. When they finally parted, breathless, Natalia whispered, "This is madness." Anthony's forehead rested against hers. "Yes," he murmured, "but it's ours." That night, Natalia lay beside him, her body curled into the safety of his arms. She knew she should be terrified that surrendering to him meant chaining herself to his world forever. And yet, as his fingers traced idle patterns along her back, she felt a fragile peace she had never known before. But far across the city, plans were already in motion. Natalia's name circled on photographs spread across a table, her face marked with a red cross. For every embrace, a shadow waited. For every heartbeat, danger lurked closer. And as Natalia drifted into sleep against Anthony's chest, he remained awake, eyes fixed on the darkness, knowing that love had made him vulnerable and more dangerous than ever. The pale light of morning stretched across the room like tentative fingers brushing over tangled sheets, and the quiet, steady rhythm of two hearts breathing side by side. Natalia opened her eyes slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, the muted luxury of the space around her, and the warmth that held her close. Anthony Morgan's arm was still around her waist, protective, immovable, as though even in sleep he refused to let go. She turned her head carefully, studying the hard lines of his face, softened by slumber. Vulnerability lingered there, a rare glimpse of the man behind the power, a man she had begun to see, not as a shadowy figure of fear, but as someone unbearably human. Yet fear gnawed at her still. What had she done? She had crossed a line, surrendered to a desire she had promised herself she could resist. Now there was no retreat, no pretending. Her life was tangled irrevocably with his. She shifted gently, intending to slip free, but his grip tightened instinctively. His eyes opened, storm gray and unyielding. "You were leaving," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. Natalia's lips parted, but she found no denial ready. "I just needed air." His gaze softened, though he did not let go. "Air you can have, but not distance. Not anymore." Later in the kitchen, Natalia busied herself with the familiar ritual of brewing coffee. The domestic normalcy felt almost surreal, set against the weight of the previous night. She heard his footsteps approach, steady, deliberate. He leaned against the counter, watching her. "You're quiet," he observed. She stirred sugar into her cup, her hand trembling faintly. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," he replied simply. Not everything needs words. But silence was dangerous too. Silence let her thoughts run wild about the photograph of her mother, about the man who had tried to take her, about the danger she now embodied, simply by existing in his orbit. Finally, she asked the question that had burned within her for days. "What are you, Anthony? Who are you really?" He held her gaze unflinching. A man who built an empire from blood and betrayal. A man who has enemies in every shadow. And a man who against his own judgment cannot let you go. Her breath caught. The honesty in his tone stripped away every illusion. He wasn't pretending to be safe. He wasn't offering her comfort wrapped in lies. He was telling her the truth, raw, brutal, and impossibly seductive. That afternoon, Anthony insisted they leave the city. Natalia resisted at first, not wanting to feel like a fugitive in her own life. But when he explained, she saw the flicker of worry in his eyes that he rarely allowed anyone to witness. They drove for hours away from the skyscrapers and neon lights into the countryside, where rolling fields stretched endlessly and the horizon breathed freely. For the first time in weeks, Natalia felt the heaviness lift from her chest. She rolled the window down, letting the wind whip her hair, her laughter breaking free in a way that startled even herself. Anthony glanced at her, and for once, the edges of his mouth curved into something real. Not the practiced smile of a man who owned the world, but the quiet joy of a man seeing something precious come alive. They stopped at a secluded lake surrounded by trees. The air smelled of pine and water clean and untouched by the city's weight. Natalia knelt by the edge, dipping her fingers into the cool surface. Ripples spread outward, fragile circles that faded into silence. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Anthony stood beside her, his presence grounding. "So are you." The words were simple, but spoken in his low, certain voice. They carried a weight that made her heart stutter. As they sat together on the grass, Natalia turned to him. "Tell me about that night, the night I saved you." His eyes darkened with memory. "I was 25, reckless. I thought I could take everything by force. My enemies proved me wrong. They left me bleeding in an alley, discarded like trash." His voice dropped softer. "And then you appeared. A girl who should have run but didn't. You tore your own scarf to bandage my wounds. You looked at me, not with fear, but with something else. Something I'd never seen before. And then you left before I could even ask your name." Natalia's chest tightened. The memory surfaced clearer now, the taste of fear that night, the desperate instinct to help, despite her trembling hands. She had forgotten him, but he had remembered her all these years. "Why didn't you try to find me sooner?" she asked quietly. He exhaled slowly. "Because I didn't want to drag you into this world. But fate has its own design." As the sun dipped low, casting gold across the lake, Natalia felt the pull between them tighten, like a thread she could no longer deny. He reached for her hand, his touch warm, grounding. She looked into his eyes and saw not the ruthless empire builder, not the man who made others tremble, but the one who had carried her memory like a hidden wound. When he kissed her, it was different from before, slower, deeper, laden with the weight of years unspoken. It wasn't madness this time. It was inevitability. Her fingers tangled in his hair. His arms circled her waist, pulling her closer. The world narrowed to the two of them, a universe born from a single moment of kindness, years ago, that had bound their fates ever since. When they broke apart, breathless, Natalia whispered, "This will destroy us." His lips brushed her temple. "Or save us. Time will decide." Their fragile peace shattered when they returned to the city. Waiting at Natalia's door was another envelope. Inside, a photograph of Ruth, her mother, this time with bruises shadowing her face. Beneath it, a message scrawled in red ink. "The debt is never paid. We'll come for her, and for you." Natalia's blood ran cold. She dropped the picture, her hands trembling. "They have her," she whispered. Anthony picked up the photograph, his jaw hardening. "Then we take her back." Fear surged through Natalia. "You can't just—" "I can," he cut in, his voice sharp. "And I will." His eyes met hers, burning with lethal intent. "They've declared war, and wars are what I know best." That night, Natalia sat alone in Anthony's penthouse, staring out over the glittering city. Somewhere her mother was in danger. Somewhere men plotted to use her as bait to tear apart the fragile bond she and Anthony had only just begun to build. Behind her, she heard Anthony's quiet footsteps. He stood at the window beside her, his reflection dark against the glass. "You don't have to fight this," she said softly, though her voice broke. His hand brushed hers, fingers interlacing. I already chose to the moment I saw you again. Natalia closed her eyes, torn between terror and a love that was becoming impossible to deny. Outside, the city pulsed with secrets and violence. But in that moment, as his hand held hers, she realized something with startling clarity. Even if it destroyed them, she would rather walk through the fire with him than spend another day without him. And deep in her heart, she knew the fire was already burning. The photograph lay on the table like a wound that would not close. Natalia couldn't look away from it. Her mother, Ruth, her face marked with bruises, her eyes hollow, her hands trembling over cards that no longer held any meaning. Every time Natalia blinked, she saw it again, burned into her mind. The shame, the grief, the helpless fury swirled inside her until she could hardly breathe. Anthony stood beside her, silent, his jaw clenched. He had looked at the photograph once, and then turned away, as if unable to trust himself to see it again, without breaking the fragile control that defined him. At last, Natalia whispered, "This is my fault." His gaze snapped to her, sharp and unforgiving. "No. This is theirs. Do not carry their crimes on your shoulders. But if it weren't for me—" She bit her lip, fighting tears. "They're using her because of me." Anthony crossed the distance in 2 strides. His hands gripped her shoulders firmly, forcing her to meet his storm-gray eyes. "They would have found another way. They always do. This is not on you, Natalia. It's on me now. And I will end it." Later, in the quiet of his study, Anthony leaned over maps, photographs, and lists of names. His men filed in and out, murmuring updates, waiting for orders. Natalia lingered at the doorway, watching. He was transformed here, no longer the man who had kissed her by the lake, who had held her trembling body in his arms. Here he was, commander strategist, the center of a storm of power and violence. Finally, when the room emptied, she stepped inside. "You're planning to kill them," she said softly. His eyes lifted to hers. "I'm planning to bring your mother back. However I must." Natalia's heart ached. She wanted to beg him to find another way, to remind him that blood only called for more blood. But when she saw the steel in his eyes, she knew there was no other way in his world. She approached slowly, laying her hand on his. "Promise me one thing. Promise me you'll come back to me." His fingers curled around hers, his grip strong, steady. "Even if I have to crawl from hell itself, I'll return to you." Her throat tightened. It was not a safe promise, but it was all he could give. And it was enough to make her believe. That night, Natalia could not sleep. She wandered the vast penthouse, her bare feet silent on marble floors, her mind restless. Every corner seemed haunted by shadows, not of ghosts, but of choices each heavier than the last. She paused by the window, staring out at the city lights. Somewhere beneath them, her mother was suffering. Somewhere men whispered her name, like a weapon, plotting how to break Anthony through her. Her reflection in the glass startled her. Was this really who she had become? A woman trapped between loyalty to her blood and love for a man whose world was built on danger. She pressed her palm to the cool glass and whispered to the night, "What do I do?" And though no answer came, she felt the echo of Anthony's presence, steady even in silence. The following morning, Anthony found her curled on the couch, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He said nothing at first, simply draped a blanket over her shoulders and sat down beside her. "You shouldn't carry this alone," he murmured. Natalia turned to him, her eyes wet. "But I can't do nothing. She's my mother. I know." He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. "And because she's your mother, she matters to me too." The simplicity of his words undid her. She leaned into his touch, letting herself believe just for a moment that love could exist even in a world like his. By noon, his men were ready. Black cars lined the private garage, engines humming. Anthony stood at the center, issuing commands with quiet authority. Weapons were checked, routes discussed, contingencies planned. Natalia hovered at the edge, her heart thundering. She wanted to stop him, to scream that this wasn't her world, that she couldn't bear to see him swallowed by violence. But her voice failed. Instead, she crossed the space and caught his hand. "Be careful." For once, the commander's mask slipped. His eyes softened as he bent to kiss her forehead, lingering, as if to brand the moment into memory. "Wait for me," he whispered. Hours crawled like years. Natalia paced the penthouse, unable to sit, unable to breathe. Every ring of her phone made her flinch. Every shadow outside the window made her heart lurch. Finally, unable to endure the silence, she returned to the study. The map still lay across the table, names circled in red. She traced the ink with trembling fingers, trying to understand the world Anthony lived in, the choices he had to make. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, bruised and broken. Then Anthony's, fierce, unyielding, yet tender only for her. She realized with startling clarity she could not separate them anymore. Saving her mother meant stepping fully into his world. Loving him meant carrying his battles as her own. Near midnight, the phone rang. Natalia's heart leapt into her throat. She snatched it up. "It's done." Anthony's voice came low and steady. Tears blurred her vision. "Is she?" "She's safe. I have her." Relief broke through her like a flood. She sank to her knees, sobbing, clutching the phone as though it were life itself. "I'm bringing her to you," he said softly. When the door finally opened, Natalia ran forward. Her mother stumbled inside, weak, bruised, but alive. Natalia caught her, holding her tightly, tears soaking both their faces. "Mom," she whispered, "it's over. You're safe now." Ruth clung to her, trembling. "I'm sorry, Nat. I never wanted this life for you." Natalia shook her head, pressing her face into her mother's hair. "We'll find a way through. Together." Behind them, Anthony stood silently watching. His clothes were darkened with blood, not his own, she hoped, and his expression unreadable. Yet when Natalia's eyes met his, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, devotion, a promise neither dared voice aloud. Later, after her mother had fallen into exhausted sleep, Natalia found Anthony on the balcony, staring out at the city, as if it were both his kingdom and his prison. She approached quietly, laying a hand on his arm. He turned, his eyes shadowed but soft, when they landed on her. "You kept your promise," she said. "I always will." His voice was rough, worn by the night's battles. She stepped closer, resting her head against his chest. His arms closed around her, instantly pulling her into the safety she had begun to crave more than air itself. For a long moment, they simply stood there, the city sprawling beneath them, the night wrapping around like a secret. And in that silence, Natalia realized she was no longer on the edge of love. She had fallen completely and irrevocably into a man who could both save her and ruin her in the same breath. But far from the balcony's glow, in another hidden room of the city, men gathered again. The leader slammed his fist on the table. "Morgan thinks he's untouchable. But everyone has a breaking point. If not the mother, then the girl herself." The room filled with murmurs of agreement, the shuffle of knives and guns. War had only just begun. Back at the penthouse, Anthony held Natalia closer, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He could already feel the storm building, fierce and inevitable. And deep within him, a single vow burned brighter than ever, Whatever it cost, he would not let her go. The night after her mother's return should have been filled with relief. Natalia had imagined herself clinging to Ruth, listening to her promises of change, believing that everything had finally shifted towards safety. But reality was far colder. Ruth lay in the guest room, restless, muttering in half-sleep, her fingers twitching as if shuffling phantom cards. The bruises on her face had begun to fade, but the deeper wounds, the ones no eye could see, remained carved in her expression. Natalia sat beside her, holding her mother's frail hand, and felt the weight of exhaustion press down on her chest. Relief was poisoned with guilt, fear with tenderness. She had her mother back, but at what cost? And for how long? Behind her, Anthony lingered silently at the door. He did not intrude, did not speak, but his presence was steady, an anchor she found herself relying on more than she wished to admit. When morning came, Ruth woke with sunken eyes. She reached for her daughter's hand, weakly whispering, "I never meant for you to carry this, Nat. You should have had a different life." Natalia's throat closed. "It doesn't matter now. You're here, and that's enough." But Ruth shook her head, bitter tears welling. "It's not enough. I can't stop. The cards, the debts, it's like a hunger, a curse. Even if Anthony saved me today, what about tomorrow?" The confession pierced Natalia. She wanted to promise her mother that everything would change, that this time was different. But she could not lie, not when she had seen the truth in Ruth's trembling hands. Anthony entered then, carrying a tray with tea. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes flickered toward Natalia, a silent understanding, a recognition that the bond between mother and daughter was as fragile as glass. "Rest," he said simply, placing the tray down. "You're safe here." Ruth's eyes darted to him, a mixture of gratitude and fear. She whispered something under her breath that Natalia barely caught. Safe for now. Far from the quiet of the penthouse, another conversation unfolded. Two of Anthony's men sat in a dimly lit room, voices low but sharp. "He's distracted," one muttered. The girls turned his head. "He's slipping." The other leaned closer, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Slipping men make mistakes. Mistakes make opportunities." They spoke of loyalty as if it were currency, of betrayal as though it were inevitable. And in their whispers, seeds of treachery began to sprout. One name lingered like poison in the air: Morgan. Back in the city, Anthony tried to restore some semblance of calm for Natalia. He took her to places untouched by violence: a hidden garden where the air smelled of roses, a quiet library lined with leather-bound books where time seemed suspended. Natalia let herself breathe in those moments. She watched him as he sat across from her, a book in his hands, his brow furrowed in concentration. It was a sight so ordinary, it broke her heart, because she knew this was not who he could ever truly be. "You look different here," she murmured, once her voice barely louder than the whisper of turning pages. He looked up, puzzled. "Different? Yes. Like you belong to a world that isn't built on fear." His eyes softened, but only for a heartbeat. Maybe in another life. The words hung heavy between them both, beautiful and devastating. But peace never lasted. One evening, Natalia found her mother in the study, rifling through drawers. When confronted, Ruth snapped, "I was just looking." For what? Natalia demanded. Her mother's eyes darted away. "Money. Anything. I can't fight it, Nat. I thought I could, but I can't." Natalia's voice broke. "After everything. After what they did to you." Tears streaked down Ruth's face, but her hands still shook, restless, searching. "It's who I am." Anthony appeared in the doorway, silent witness to the unraveling. He did not speak, but his eyes were grave. Natalia felt the gulf widen inside her chest, between the daughter who longed to save her mother and the woman who realized salvation might never come. Anthony's men began to falter. Orders delayed messages intercepted whispers of doubt, spreading like cracks in a mirror. He noticed it, the hesitation in their eyes, the guarded glances when they thought he wasn't looking. One evening he summoned his most trusted lieutenant. "Something is wrong," Anthony said. The man shifted uncomfortably. "Some of the others, they think you've changed, that the girl has softened you." Anthony's jaw tightened. "Do they forget who I am?" "No," the lieutenant admitted. "That's what frightens them. They wonder when you'll remember again." Anthony dismissed him with a flick of his hand, but long after the man left his words lingered. He knew betrayal was near betrayal, born not from enemies in the streets but from the cracks within his own empire. Natalia felt the tension too. She saw it in the way men averted their eyes, in the sharpness of Anthony's tone when he gave orders. She wanted to ask him to demand honesty about the shifting tides around them, but fear held her tongue. Instead, one night she whispered as they lay together, "Do you ever regret it? Building all of this?" He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "I regret the cost, but not the choice." Her hand slid across his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "And what about me? Do you regret letting me in?" His arm tightened around her. "That's the one choice I'll never regret." Her eyes stung with tears she did not let fall. Because she believed him, and because believing him terrified her. One night, as Anthony prepared to leave for a meeting, Natalia caught sight of two of his men speaking in hushed tones near the garage. Their eyes flickered toward her, sharp with something she couldn't name, contempt perhaps, or blame. When she told Anthony, he brushed it aside with a stern, "I'll handle it." But the unease stayed with her. She realized then that the danger wasn't only outside. It was inside, in the loyalty that could shatter at any moment. And if it did, it wouldn't just be his empire that fell. It would be both of them. That night, Natalia dreamed of fire. She saw the city burning, Anthony standing in the flames, his hand outstretched toward her, while shadows dragged him down. She reached for him, screaming, but the fire consumed them both. She woke with a cry, tears on her cheeks, her chest heaving. Anthony stirred beside her, instantly alert. "What is it?" he asked, his voice sharp with concern. She shook her head, unable to speak the terror aloud. She only clung to him, pressing her face into his chest, as if by holding him tighter, she could keep the dream from coming true. Anthony's hand stroked her hair, his voice low. "I won't let them take me from you. I won't let them take you from me." But in the shadows of his mind, he knew the truth. Betrayal was already at his door, and the war he had feared was closer than ever. The days that followed Ruth's return passed like walking on glass, every step fragile, every silence dangerous. Natalia tried to build small pieces of normalcy, tea in the mornings with her mother, late evenings spent curled in Anthony's arms. Yet beneath those moments, tension simmered. She noticed it in the way Anthony's men looked at him. Not all, but some. Their gazes lingered too long, sharp, with something that felt like doubt, or worse, contempt. One evening, as Anthony briefed his men in the study, Natalia lingered outside the half-open door. She heard voices rising sharper than usual. "We've followed you for years, Morgan," one man said. "We bled for you. But now, you risk everything for a woman." Silence followed, thick as smoke. Natalia held her breath. When Anthony finally spoke, his tone was low, lethal. "If loyalty to me depends on the woman I love, then you were never mine to begin with." The meeting ended soon after, the men filing out in silence. Natalia stepped back into the shadows, her heart pounding. She wanted to run to him to ease the weight in his shoulders, but something stopped her. Perhaps it was fear of what she had just heard, or fear that it was true. Meanwhile, Ruth's fragile recovery faltered. Natalia found her mother one afternoon with trembling hands holding a deck of cards Anthony's men had confiscated. Ruth's eyes burned with restless hunger, her lips whispering numbers, as though she were already gambling with ghosts. Mom Natalia pleaded, taking the cards away. "You can't. Not again." Ruth's gaze snapped up, filled with shame and defiance all at once. "It's who I am, Nat. I can't just stop." "You almost died," Natalia whispered. "And I'll die again if I have to. But don't you see? It's in my blood." The words struck Natalia like a blade. Was self-destruction truly written into their family's fate? And if so, what did that mean for her? Tangled now in Anthony's violent world, Anthony entered then silent but watchful. His eyes flicked between mother and daughter, and though he said nothing, Natalia sensed his worry deepen. That night, Natalia sought comfort in Anthony's embrace. They lay together in the quiet, the city lights painting faint gold across the sheets. "Do you ever feel it?" she whispered. "That everything is fragile, that if we take one wrong step, it all shatters." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "I feel it every day. But fragility doesn't frighten me. Losing you does." Her throat tightened. She turned, their lips meeting in a slow kiss that carried all the desperation she couldn't voice. His touch was both fierce and gentle, a reminder that even in the heart of chaos, they could still find each other. Yet even as she clung to him, a shadow lingered in her heart, a whisper that their world was already beginning to break. It happened 3 nights later. Anthony was in the underground garage preparing to leave for a meeting. Natalia watched from the balcony above her hand, gripping the railing as men moved around the sleek cars. The air felt different that night, heavier. Then it shattered. Gunfire erupted, sudden and brutal. Men shouted, weapons drawn. Natalia screamed as chaos exploded beneath her. She saw 2 of Anthony's own men turn their guns on him. Betrayal painted in every movement. Anthony reacted instantly, a predator unleashed. He moved with lethal precision, disarming one, striking down another. But more emerged, shadows spilling into the garage. Natalia ran down the stairs, heart in her throat. She ducked behind a pillar as bullets ricocheted, her eyes locked on Anthony. He was outnumbered, yet unyielding, his presence, commanding even in the midst of treachery. "Get her out!" he roared to the few loyal men still standing. Hands grabbed Natalia, pulling her toward the exit. She fought against them, screaming his name, but the chaos drowned her voice. From the safety of the car, Natalia watched in horror as flames began to lick the edges of the garage. An explosion ripped through the concrete firelight, casting monstrous shadows across the walls. Through the haze of smoke, she saw him, Anthony, still standing, still fighting a dark figure against the blaze. And then the car jerked forward, carrying her away, tearing him from her sight. She clawed at the door, desperate to get back, but the guards restrained her. "Let me go. He's still in there," she cried, her voice breaking. But the car did not stop. The city blurred around her, her sobs drowning in the roar of the engine. They took her back to the penthouse, but it felt like a prison without him. Hours passed, each one heavier than the last. Natalia sat by the window, staring into the night, praying for the sound of footsteps, for the sight of his storm-gray eyes. Her mother tried to comfort her, but Ruth's trembling hands betrayed her own fear. "He's strong," she murmured. "Men like him don't die easy." Natalia clung to those words, though they felt like sand slipping through her fingers. Near dawn, the door finally opened. Natalia leapt to her feet. Anthony entered, blood-stained and exhausted, but alive. His shirt was torn, his face streaked with soot, yet his eyes still burned with unyielding fire. Natalia ran to him, throwing herself into his arms. He caught her, holding her tight, his breath ragged against her hair. "I thought I lost you," she sobbed. "You never will," he murmured, though his voice was raw, his body trembling beneath her touch. When he finally pulled back, his gaze hardened. It was them, my own men, bought turned, betrayal from within. The words sliced the air. Natalia saw the fury simmering beneath his calm, a storm barely contained. They'll pay, he vowed, every last one. That night, as he stood at the window overlooking the city, Natalia approached quietly. She touched his arm, feeling the tension coiled beneath his skin. Anthony, she whispered, how much more blood will it take? How many battles before it ends? He turned, his eyes shadowed. As many as it takes to keep you safe. Her heart ached. She wanted to believe safety could be won with love alone, but in his world, safety was written in blood. Still, when he pulled her close, she let herself surrender. Because even if the world burned, she wanted to burn with him. Far across the city, in a hidden room, lit by flickering lamps, the traitors gathered again. He survived, one muttered bitterly. Another sneered. Then we strike harder. We won't stop until Morgan falls and the girl with him. The plan was not finished. The war was only beginning. Back at the penthouse, Natalia slept fitfully in Anthony's arms, unaware of the storm tightening around them. And Anthony, awake in the darkness, stared out at the skyline. Betrayal had touched his house, his men, his heart. But it would not take her, not while he still breathed. The city had not slept since the betrayal. Rumors whispered through alleys. Voices hushed at the mention of Morgan's name. Some said he had lost control. Others claimed his empire had fractured beyond repair. Natalia sat by the window of the penthouse, watching smoke rise faintly from the district where the garage had burned. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the cold seep deeper into her bones. Behind her, Anthony moved like a storm contained within skin, quiet, deliberate, but always dangerous. His men came and went, with reports each one darker than the last. He dismissed them with curt nods, his mind already 2 steps ahead, calculating planning. Yet, when his eyes fell on Natalia, the storm shifted. "You're trembling," he murmured, crossing to her side. She shook her head. "I'm just afraid." His hand cupped her cheek, warm against the chill. "Fear keeps you alive, but it will never take you from me." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, and wished she could believe it. Her mother's recovery faltered. The bruises on Ruth's skin faded, but the darkness in her eyes remained. She wandered the halls like a restless ghost, whispering about debts and cards, her voice breaking in cycles of regret. One night, Natalia confronted her. "Mom, you can't keep living like this. You'll destroy yourself. And me." Ruth's gaze lifted, tears glistening. "I already have Nat. I gave you a legacy of ruin. And now he's paying for it too." Natalia wanted to protest, but deep inside she knew it was true. Every thread of her life seemed woven from her mother's mistakes. Debts inherited, shadows multiplied. Yet when Anthony passed by silent and steady, Natalia saw the truth clearer. Her life was no longer just her mother's story. It was hers. And his. Anthony called his most trusted men into the study. Natalia watched from the corner as he laid out his plan to root out every traitor left in his ranks. "This doesn't end with survival," he said, his voice cutting through the air. "It ends with fire. No betrayal will stand." One of his lieutenants nodded. "And the girl?" Athoni's gaze flickered toward Natalia, unwavering. "She is untouchable. Anyone who so much as breathes against her will wish they never drew breath at all." The silence that followed was thick-edged with both fear and respect. Natalia's heart ached as she realized the price of being loved by a man like him. Safety came not from peace, but from blood spilled in her name. Later that night, Natalia found Anthony on the balcony, whiskey in hand, staring at the city like it was both his kingdom and his cage. "Tell me the truth," she whispered, stepping closer. "Is there ever an end to this? Or will we keep fighting until nothing is left?" He turned to her, his eyes shadowed. "I don't know. But if there's an end, it's with you. Always with you." Her breath caught. She reached for his hand, their fingers tangling. "And if I can't bear it, if I can't carry the weight of your world?" His thumb brushed over her knuckles, tender, in contrast to the steel in his voice. "Then I'll carry it for both of us." Tears blurred her vision. She leaned into him, their lips meeting in a kiss that tasted of desperation and devotion. Every touch, every breath felt like goodbye, and forever, all at once. It happened just before dawn. Natalia woke to the sound of shattering glass. She sat up, heart racing, as shadows burst into the penthouse, men masked, armed eyes burning with intent. Anthony was already on his feet, a gun in his hand, his body a shield before hers. Gunfire, cracked shouts filled the air. Natalia clutched her mother, dragging her toward cover, but fear paralyzed her as she watched Anthony move with lethal precision. Yet this time there were too many. Betrayal had multiplied. One of the masked men lunged toward Natalia. She screamed, but before he reached her, Anthony's bullet struck. He caught her a moment later, pulling her into his arms. "I told you," he whispered fiercely. "No one touches you." But even as he spoke, blood ran down his side, not hers but his. The attackers fled when reinforcements arrived, but the damage was done. Anthony collapsed onto the marble floor, his hand pressed to his wound. Natalia fell beside him, her hands desperate against the bleeding. "Stay with me," she cried, tears streaking down her face. "Please, Anthony, don't leave me." His eyes found hers, storm gray but softened with pain and love. "I won't. I promised you." She kissed him then, fierce and trembling, as though her lips could keep him tethered to life. His hand cupped her face, smearing her tears with his blood. And in that fragile, broken moment, Natalia understood fully to love him, meant to live with constant loss, to embrace a world where safety was an illusion, and devotion was written in scars. By the time the sun rose, Anthony was bandaged, pale, but alive. Natalia sat by his side, her hand in his, refusing to let go. Her mother slept in the next room, restless even in safety. The city outside stirred awake, oblivious to the war still raging in its shadows. Anthony stirred, his voice hoarse. "You should have run from me." Natalia shook her head, tears glistening. "And spend the rest of my life wondering if I abandoned the only man I ever loved. No, Anthony. If this is my fate, then it's mine. With you." His eyes closed briefly, as if her words both healed and broke him. When he opened them again, he whispered, "Then we face it together." Days later, the penthouse felt quieter, but not safer. Ruth's presence was fragile. Natalia's love was fierce, and Anthony's empire stood on the edge of collapse and rebirth. On the balcony at dusk, Natalia leaned against Anthony, her head on his shoulder. The city stretched before them, alive with light and shadow. "We don't know what comes next," she said softly. "No," he agreed. "But whatever it is, we'll endure." She closed her eyes, letting the rhythm of his heartbeat steady her. The future was uncertain, the past unrelenting, but the present, this moment, belonged to them. And sometimes a moment was enough. If you've followed Natalia and Anthony's journey this far, you've walked through fire with them, through betrayal, tenderness, and the fragile kind of love that is born in shadows. Stories like this one live not only on the page, but also in the hearts of those who carry them. So if their love has moved you, if you've held your breath in fear or found yourself yearning for their next dawn, let your voice be part of the story. Leave your thoughts, share your heart, and stay with them as their journey continues. Because in the end, every story needs someone who believes in it.